This is a one-speaker meeting. Please welcome our speaker tonight, Pete.
Hi, my name is Pete. I'm an alcoholic. Great to be here, and thank you very much for inviting me, Neil. If I can remember, I'll tell you later about how I know Neil. We've known each other a long time, long before we got here. I want to congratulate the birthday people. That's spectacular that we actually get to go years without drinking and without using. I want to congratulate the chip people. You're doing so well. You know, I had a big problem. I kept confusing how I was doing by how I was feeling. And I was told by a sponsor that if anyone asked me how I was doing, I had to tell them probably better than I know. Because if I am sober, I'm doing better than I know. And I saw a lot of new people here tonight. Some of you stood up and identified. Some of you probably didn't. If you're new, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm sorry it's come to this, but this is what it is. And you might as well stick around because they're going to send you back here anyhow. And I know we have some friends who are probably staying in rehab facilities, getting your feet back on the ground because it's probably not safe to have you in the general populace right now. And as comfortable as that may be, the object is to get out of there. And if you come to Alcoholics Anonymous, once you get out of there, you won't have to go back there. So that's what I'm here to tell you. And for you new folks, I'm just here to give you a little hope. I know you wish the meeting was already over, but, you know, it's just another day or so, and you'll be able to leave. I had a lot of problems, you know. I drank, had a lot of problems. I was raised by a small family of Jewish martyrs in the Bronx. Yeah! You know, that would be enough to make anyone drink. Except, you know, we like to think that we don't drink because, you know, it might diminish the pain too much. So the things we did was we suffered and we felt unappreciated for all the great acts we performed. You know, my father was a doctor. He was a brilliant, kind doctor. I knew as soon as I had a cognitive thought that I was never going to measure up to this doctor. That's just part of my spiritual malady. You know, most kids, when they play doctor in the house, they, you know, put on suits and start poking their friends. It was a time people would return prescriptions to my father when they were done with them. So he had a closet full of pills. So when I played doctor, I would go into Dad's closet, and one day I might be taking an antibiotic, and the next day it could be a heavy-duty sedative. You know, it didn't matter. I was playing doctor because I knew when I felt good, I was good. All I wanted to do was feel good. I wanted to feel good all the time. And I couldn't feel good all the time. And it really pissed me off that I couldn't feel good all the time. I got mad at my family because they couldn't make me feel good all the time. I thought that was their job. So, you know, I knew I had to get out of that house. I ended up running away from home, you know. I was 44. Gratefully, I got to acknowledge it. You know, my body left at 16, but there were 28 years of ransom notes to those folks saying, bail me out of this, bail me out of that. But they say, but you're an executive. You're an executive. You've got a staff. You're making more money than you're... I need help. I need help. The only help I wanted, though, was material help. I didn't know that there was spiritual help, that it was available to me. You know, alcohol was magic for me. You know, like probably most Jewish kids, my first drunk was at a Passover Seder, where I got completely snockered. I was drinking my wine, I was drinking everybody's wine, and, you know, my story was that I came to, and my head was in the lap of a gal named Veronica Klein, who was absolutely stunning. She had eyes that were like this big, she had big lips, long, she was just gorgeous, and she was stroking my forehead going, Pete, is there anything I can do for you? And, you know, I was 10 and she was 9, and that's about as good as it was going to get for the next 35 years. You know, that image, get me drunk, take care of me. You know, that I went looking for that, and I went a lot of strange places. I went up to the gates of insanity, and I took a few steps inside those gates. And, you know, I didn't start hanging out at liquor stores then, but it did fix in my mind, this stuff is good. This stuff works. I knew alcohol and I were going to be friends. And, you know, I was considered an athlete then. In the Bronx, there weren't schoolyards with grass. There were schoolyards with, like, cement. So if you were, I had the kind of mind that figured out a ball is always going to bounce true. It isn't like it's going to hit something in the grass. And so they thought I was a good ball player because I had scientifically figured out that the ball was going to bounce. So I got on a baseball team. I went down to Puerto Rico with an all-star team. We were about 13 or 14, and I got myself a bottle of Monkey rum. And I put that thing down, and I decided it would be nice to sit under a rain gutter. It just seemed, it was cool. It was so refreshing. And I came back and had pneumonia and was sick for a couple of months. You know, that was my second dramatic, you know, run-in with alcohol. But it worked. Alcohol worked. I was terrified in high school. I went to a special high school. You had to take exams to get into a few special high schools in New York. There was one called Bronx High School of Science. And there was a kid who'd won the $64,000 question at 14 who was going to that high school with me. He was brilliant. He was playing chess with computers in the 60s. And, you know, I started out my first semester there. I had a 97-point grade average. Put me somewhere in the middle of the class. And by the time I had, you know, I had sought my own level, managed to get down into the 80s, the low 80s, and there were, you know, I was like 830 out of 900. I went to college. I was 16 years old, wasn't ready for college, tried to drink my way through, wasn't able to drink my way through, tried to study, couldn't study. Couldn't study, and that's a problem for me because if I can't study, I can't go to class. Because the worst thing that could possibly happen to me would be to be embarrassed. I don't want to be embarrassed. And if I went to class and I got called on it and I got embarrassed by the professor, I'd never be able to go back. So I called my father. He said, I think I might be able to help you, son. And he sent me down 24 little yellow pills wrapped in a Kleenex. And he said, this should be able to help you study. And so I took the first one, and it didn't help me at all. And he's a doctor, you know. So a half hour later, I took another one. Because, you know, we talk about being honest, open-minded, and willing. So I waited a little bit, and that didn't work, and then I took the next one. So and I was surprised because the third one barely went down my throat. And I said, but these are such small pills. What happened to my throat? And I read all night. It was brilliant. It was brilliant. The only thing is I only read one page. You know, for like 6 hours. So I knew the academic life was like fading fast, but the pills showed great promise. And I didn't know then. It seemed odd that I'm such a scared kid. You know, I should be doing sedatives. I shouldn't be doing speed, but that's what I was doing. As a matter of fact, at that time, this was in the 60s, there was a Portuguese rosé called Matus that was like a requirement of college students to drink. The stuff did not taste very good, but it made a great candle holder. And that way, when you were later smoking your dope and drinking the stuff you wanted, then you would have a nice candle holder from the Matus bottle. So I'm now in Washington, D.C., I'm smoking dope, I'm drinking Matus, I'm failing out of school, I'm trying to get jobs, I'm selling myself on my potential. I give great interview and lousy performance, you know, and I'm losing jobs. I go back to school again, I lose that, they kick me out. They suggest I might want to leave. So I say, okay, I will take that suggestion. Now, at the same time, I have a brother 2 years older than me. He's a brilliant doctor. He's a doctor just like my father. I just took the independent route, you know? I became an unlicensed dispenser of narcotics, trying to just make it through. It was a time when everybody dealt and everybody had money. But the bottom line is I was drinking and using my way out of everything. I was called into the draft board. That's what happened in the 60s when you weren't in school. There was a big war going on. And they took me down to Whitehall Station. And the chief psychiatrist at Whitehall Station said, Mr. Kastoff, this thing in Vietnam, this is big. This is very big, and it's very serious. But I can tell you, as a representative of the armed forces, that it's not that big. And I cannot conceive of there being a threat against the Republic that would be serious enough that we would ever require your services. We just don't have a job that I can see you doing. So I want you to just go away. Just go away and try not to hurt yourself. And you know, I took that as a great moral victory. I had overcome the evil empire. Like everything else that I got away with, there was a price that was to be paid. Luckily, I got to honor that after I got sober. I left there, and interestingly enough, the post office wasn't that strict, and they hired me 2 weeks later. So I went postal before it was hip to go postal. And I was a hippie mailman, and it was fun, because I could drink, I could do drugs. All I had to do was make it around that route and get most of the mail right and not cause too big a problem. There was a problem one day. Somebody gave me something. He gave me a mind-altering chemical, and it was one of those routes that day where I had to go up a hill and down a hill and up a hill and down a hill again. So you can imagine the first hill was pretty innocent. But when I got to the second, it was on. And I'm now knocking on doors because I really want to be a friendly guy. And I'm knocking on the doors, and people are saying, "Who is it?" I'm going, "It's the mailman." And there you go. Oh, man. Expectations. Who sent me something? And, I give them, 2 magazines and a bill. And they go, "Why did you knock on the door?" And I went, "Because I'm the mailman. And I wanted to say hi." And, I didn't realize how lucky I was hitchhiking back off the route that day, that, I didn't get locked away. So that was my government career. That ended. I was running a law office during the day, which was very good for me. I got to do some of those things that I had kind of given up on. Like when the draft thing happened, it was like, okay, you're not going to be a doctor like your father. You're not going to be a lawyer like your uncle. You're really not going to be able to serve society very well because you're a government reject. But I was running this law office, and I was writing briefs, and I was being very productive, and I was running a liquor store at night. It was the perfect combination. I had a built-in clientele. And all this came to a screeching halt when I got offered the opportunity to come to California. And I came out here. And I was in the film business. I got very lucky, caught on with some incredible films. And that's when I met Neil. Neil and I met, it was around 1977, 78. I came out here in 75. And now I was a player. Now I had a staff. I had a corner office in Century City. I had a credenza where I could keep the pillow for the couch in my office. People told me what was going on because I didn't really know what was going on. All I knew was that I was partying my ass off. There was a group down at 27th Street. We would be out on the beach taking psychedelics. Then we'd be at this club called Moody's, where they had a very interesting and eclectic set of bartenders. Who you never know who you're going to run into when you get here. And there was a drink called Harbor Lights, which happened to be my favorite because it was the theory was you needed to hear the sound of the lighthouse. You were finding your way home by sound because you couldn't see anymore. And that mixed with Quaaludes and at that time smoking cocaine was that was what my life was. I was waking up in the morning. I was getting drunk and stoned before I got to work. I was getting to work at 10 o'clock. I was doing lines off my desk, getting briefed on what was happening, going to lunch, getting drunk, coming back, taking a nap, doing some more lines off my desk, going home, going to Moody's, getting home around 3 or 4 in the morning, and starting again. I was a player. There was a catastrophic meeting at the office. Someone was talking about very important things and millions of dollars, and I came out of a blackout, and I was talking about things that had nothing to do with that. Believe me, I was so far off point that the meeting was shut down. Everyone was asked to leave, and I was told to get help. It was D-Day, 1981. I went to St. John's. I checked myself into the chemical dependence unit because I am a soldier, and I am willing to take one for the team. Now, I got in there, and the symptoms I had mimicked those of a stroke. So I was put in a bed with very high bars, the paper outfit du jour, and I was given anti-seizure medication. Now, when I checked in, I didn't want anything else on my permanent record. You know, it was like, I'm not a criminal, but I've got this history of failure running through my life. So I figured, I won't tell them who I am. I said, my name's Pete Haskell. It was my, like, Leave It to Beaver homage. And like most of my plans, I had not thought it all the way through. Because I gave them my home address, my social security card number, and my driver's license number. Great plans, horrible follow-through. I couldn't keep track, you know. It was interesting, and I think in gambling there's a thing called a tell when you're watching the other player. You know, I had a tell. The tell with me was if my lips were moving, I was lying. And it wasn't that I meant to lie. It just was when my lips were moving, I was just telling you whatever I thought you wanted to hear. It had nothing to do with facts. So I'm in there, I call, I try to save the job. They say, Pete, listen. Poor Pete. Listen, we've already changed the locks. Accounting's doing the math. If we owe you anything, you'll have it, and try not to hurt yourself. And I went, wow, that's kind of harsh. And so here I am. I'm in the safest place on the globe for me. So of course I'm uncomfortable because it isn't my plan. They had a room where they had a big blackboard and it said alcoholism and drug abuse. I said, what's this? And they said, this is where the people from Alcoholics Anonymous bring meetings, and we talk about ourselves, and we help ourselves through our problems. And, you know, a little switch clicked on that said, I got to get out of here now. Because, you see, I had grown accustomed to being a loser. I was not going to have anybody else know what a loser I was. And I was convinced that if they heard the information that I'd processed, they would have to come to the same conclusion. So I had to run. I started plotting my escape. You know, the job thing didn't work. I hadn't been talking to my family because it wasn't just the kind of thing that my family and I talked about. So what I did was I called my dealer who said, Pete, I think we can make it through this. And he came and picked me up. It wasn't as daring an escape as I would have thought. The door wasn't even locked. All I had to do was turn the knob and walk out. And so that was June 10th. And what's interesting is that my friend Neil and I were bottoming out at the same time. Neil got sober a month later. And what happened with me was I just told people I was sober. And I spent 11 years coming to the occasional meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous because I knew this is where I was going to end up eventually, but feeling too much pain to identify and allow myself to get better. When it talks in the book of we have a choice between going to the bitter end, to an alcoholic death, or living a life based on spiritual principles, I know what a tough decision that is. I know what a fine line it is between comprehensible and incomprehensible demoralization. What I love about Alcoholics Anonymous was that any time I came to a meeting, I was welcomed in Alcoholics Anonymous. It didn't matter if I was sober. It didn't matter if I identified. I was welcome in Alcoholics Anonymous because I was considering opening myself up to the possibility of living a different life than I was living. I went 11 years. It was a lot of things happened. You know, I got jobs, I lost jobs, my family got sick, I got sick, I had Bell's palsy, my face was paralyzed for a few months, occupational hazard. As long as I had one side of my mouth that worked, I was still in business. I remember I had a job. I'd risen up again and got an important job, and I need one of those bridge loans from Wednesday to Friday that sometimes happen, and I asked this guy for it, and he said, "Pete, I can't give it to you. I'm paying for your car, I'm paying for your expenses, I'm paying for your health. You live in a rent-controlled place. I know what your rent is. I know what money I'm giving you. Where is it going?" I could not admit where it was going. And he said, "Well, we have some problems here." And, the only solution I had at the end of that meeting was to take the keys to that company car and the keys to that building and slam them on his desk and let him know that he would regret the day he let a piece of manpower like me slip through his fingers. And with the shoe with the hole in it, hit the parking lot asphalt in Chatsworth on that hot August afternoon, I realized I had made a dramatic decision. And, but there was no turning back. And, I like to think he looks over his estate in Malibu with the ponds and the horses and everything and goes, "Man, my life is great, but imagine what it would be like if I'd kept Pete." I remember going home and sitting by the phone waiting for them to call to beg me to come back. But, I couldn't stop drinking. I couldn't stop using. I had a pain that I didn't know there was a solution for. And I kept trying to get some kind of momentary physical relief. The insanity of my pursuing that. The insanity of my wanting to have closure with my disease. I wanted to end on a high note. I didn't like the way it ended last time. Maybe if I have one taste tonight, we'll be able to have a pleasant memory and we'll be able to say goodbye gently. And as soon as it's in my mouth, I'm off. So it's coming to 1992. My father suffers a stroke. He can't talk. He can't eat. He's being fed through a tube in his side. I'm asked to visit him. There's nothing he can't. He communicates. He's going to talk again. In May of that year, there was a 50th wedding anniversary for my parents. There was another couple that got married with them in 1942. 300 people, and I'm the goof. I'm the goof. I can't bring a gift. I can't even get myself into New York for the trip. I'm asked to give a testimonial, and I can't give a testimonial because I'm too ashamed of the part of the family I've become. But my father slices bread and says a prayer called the Shehechianu with a voice. And my brother, who'd become a doctor, said, there are things that medical science knows, and there are things that only God knows. And that God had more work for our father to do, and he gave him a voice to do it. And in that moment, I hoped maybe there was a God that had room for me. Because what I had done in my self-centeredness was created a God in my own image that was just fed up with me and had no more time for me. I came back here. I had one more job to lose, something about petty cash. And November 10th, 1992, I stopped. I stopped like I had hundreds and hundreds of times. I did not know it was going to be any different. I flailed around the house for 5 days. I asked my neighbor to take me to a meeting. She took me up to the Pacific Palisades. There was a meeting in a temple with very respectable, home-owning, family alcoholics. We got there about an hour and a half before the meeting. There were a couple of guys setting up chairs for that meeting. One of them was a guy named Ben, and the other was a guy named Joel. Turns out Joel lived 3 blocks from me in the Bronx. I'm trying to help him set up chairs, and I keep dropping everything I pick up. Now, I was wearing a soiled sweatsuit that had more than sweat in it, and I was part of the team. And he said, "Pete, listen, you're in management, aren't you?" And I looked at myself, and he said, "No, you're in management." I said, okay. "Yes, I've been in management." He says, "Why don't you watch us for a couple of weeks? And then you can tell us, because you might have a better idea for us." Now, I didn't know that was the music of Alcoholics Anonymous. But I became a part of that meeting that day. I've heard the expression when we come in here, it isn't like the gates of heaven open and welcome us in, but the gates of hell open and let us out. And the kind people in Alcoholics Anonymous are the gatekeepers who walk us through and try and keep us from returning. And So it's 15 years later, and I'm setting up chairs at that meeting every Sunday. And now I'm not the shaking, sick, smelly guy setting them up, but I'm the guy setting them up so I can see who the first people in, and so I can welcome anybody in who's shaken and smelly and doesn't know that Alcoholics Anonymous is going to work. This thing works. This thing works. I got to clear up the mess with my family. I got to make amends to my father. I remember when I made amends, I was telling him how sorry I was for disappointing him, for being such a disappointment when they gave me everything they could possibly give me. And I just wasted it all away. And he said, you know, son, that doesn't bother me. I've been a doctor over 50 years. None of my medical skills and none of the skills of any of my colleagues were able to save my son, who I saw dying in front of my eyes. But those people in Alcoholics Anonymous and that book and whatever it is you're doing, I don't have to worry about you anymore. And the man was in his late 80s. This was one of the people I said, I'm not hurting anybody, okay? There are 3,000, I'm not hurting anybody. It's just me. And I got a little glimpse into what had been going on that I was too afraid to see. And we gave him peace. We gave him peace. I thank Alcoholics Anonymous for giving him peace. I thank whatever the Creator is that made me willing to do the stuff I wasn't willing to do. You know, when I was new, there was a guy told me I had to get on my knees. And I went, Bobby, come on. In the short time he knew me, he said he wasn't aware of my being a devout practitioner of anything. But I might want to consider the fact that when God saw a Jewish guy on his knees, he recognized the magnitude of his dilemma. And he would provide for him for that day. And what happened was I needed to find a power bigger than the religious training that I had. Because as much as valuable as my religious training was, I wasn't able to turn to it to get the relief I get from Alcoholics Anonymous. I can still attend services. It doesn't change anything. I needed a bigger guy. I needed a power that couldn't exclude anybody. Because if anybody could be excluded, I would be excluded. And I've been embraced by the people in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's been the best 15 years of my life. There have been times that have been completely horrific. There have been times when I hated everybody, and they pass. I have tools that let me find what my part of it is. You know, there's a thing that says that, you know, guided by 100 forms of fear, we stepped on the toes of others and they retaliated seemingly without provocation. But we invariably find that at some point we made a position based upon self that put us in a position to be hurt later. My problem are the expectations I create for how somebody else is supposed to behave. If I would allow anybody the freedom that I'm allowed here, I would not have to suffer from those expectations. It's a spiritual journey. I'm learning more. I'm finding out that it isn't stupid that I don't know. I don't have to feel stupid because I don't know anything. I can feel excited that there's so much to learn. And if you're new, I hope you keep coming. I hope you keep coming. You know, I was told that in here, believe me, there's a wrench to fit every nut that walks in the door. Just keep coming. You will find your wrench. You will find the person who you can trust. And once you find that person you can trust, it will open you up to trusting the group. And once you can trust the group, you're home free. Thank you so much for letting me share.